Hallam Dennis. Gidley Jones had not counted the hours that it had taken him to construct the model railway. But if he had done so, they would have been numbered in thousands. They had been lonely hours, hunched over the workbench, peering into the orb of orange light spun by an Anglepoise lamp. But he had not realised that. He had been too absorbed in the intricacies of the work. It had been close work, with hair-blade saws, and needle drills, and tweezers, and fine-jawed pliers. He had worked with the aid of a flip-down magnifier that covered the whole of his forehead, like the visor that an oxyacetylene operative might use to protect his eyes when cutting apart steel plates. He worked in a shell of darkness that curved around his bent back, enfolding the small world upon which he focused. Even someone who was not an aficionado of the hobby could see that the model railway had been beautifully constructed. It depicted a small marshalling yard, somewhere out in a bleak countryside, set into a low depression between banks of grass, fringed with hedgerow trees, and separated from all that lay beyond by a barbed wire fence. 4 sidings fanned out from a loop of track off a single-track line. There were no buildings, save for the representation of a single box-like structure of the terrapin type, beside which the neat model of a British Rail van stood parked. Gidley had cleverly damaged the near-side wheel arch of this, which he'd then painted a dull, rusty colour. The place depicted a cold winter morning, lit by a cool blue spot lamp that threw the shadows of the model figures long. A tiny electric floodlight on a trellised gantry shone down upon the scene, its scale yellow beam throwing its own faint shadow at 45 degrees to those of the blue spot. A thin layer of white had been sprayed over everything, signifying frost, and there were patches of clear varnish, which reflected the lights as if they were iced water surfaces. From a culvert, beneath a stone arch, underneath the track bed, a small stream ran frozen to the edge of the ball. And nothing was out of place. All was just as it might have been, in that imagined and remembered place, in that remembered and imagined time, which was Gidley's present. The detail was amazing. Tiny fence posts held up strands of silver wire, knotted with barbs, tensioned, as is the real thing. The trees were intricate in their bare winter branches. A credible bird perched upon the roof of the dilapidated temporary building. The model figures, 2 of them, stood silent in the dawn-like light, one blowing upon his hands, the other tilted slightly, as if he moved from foot to foot to keep the cold from rising through his shoes. Gidley's wife, hovering uncertainly at his shoulder as he sat beside the model, had asked him what their names were, which had irritated him somewhat. They were not people to have names and histories. They were representations only, made of plastic and painted in acrylics, clear varnished and semi-matte. Yet after she had asked, names crept out of his unconscious mind, as if they had waited there to be called forth, and he began to hear the voices with which they spoke. Gidley operated the system. He brought in short trains pulled by small locomotives, which he uncoupled in the loop and ran around their wagons. These he then shunted into one or other of the sidings. Later, as the story developed, other small engines came and left more wagons, or collected those that had been abandoned before, or left them behind without explanation. One of the engines emitted small puffs of blue smoke from its chimney, from burning oil dripped upon a heating element hidden within the plastic body. When he had finished the construction, Gidley played hour after hour, day after day, over the weeks and into months. He played all that he had made and built. He knew the minutest detail of its story. He knew the broken pipe that leaked dark painted water. He knew the oily puddle beside the terrapin building. He knew the fence post where the farmer had made repairs. He knew the patched tarmac and the section of rail that had been renewed. He knew each tree and branch and stone and each flanged wheel. And he knew the minds of the two men standing in the cold of the early dawn, and he remembered what they had just said to each other. Throughout it all, the British Rail van and the model figures remained unmoved, throwing their long shadows beneath the cool blue spot lamp, which did not rise like a sun, nor set like one. Neither did the ice patches thaw, nor did the frosty covering over the grass and on the tarmac of the yard dissipate in the warmth of an imagined day. And Gidley played on alone. The same curve of darkness wrapped around his back, stuck in the story of his cold, blue morning.